just gave me everything I need.
Grab some popcorn, because this involves highway abandonment, federal crimes, and the most satisfying legal takedown you've ever heard. Picture me standing under a beat-up highway sign at midnight, 87 miles from home, watching storm clouds roll in. The rain hadn't started yet, but I could smell it coming. That metallic, electric smell that makes your skin crawl. My wife Sarah and her 3 enabler friends had just driven away after dumping me here, laughing like middle schoolers who'd just pulled the prank of the century. But here's the thing. I was actually grinning in the dark, because what my darling wife didn't know was that this whole night was about to become the best thing that ever happened to me. Let me back up. It started with dinner at some overpriced farm-to-table place where they charged $30 for 3 radishes and called it deconstructed salad. Sarah was holding court with her usual suspects. Jessica, who thinks being loud equals being interesting. Amy, who has the emotional intelligence of a parking meter. And Lisa, who nods along to everything like a bobblehead dog. They'd been drinking just enough to feel invincible and make spectacularly stupid decisions. The conversation started with gossip about whose marriage was falling apart. But then it turned to me, like it always did when Sarah had wine and needed to remind everyone who was in charge. David just doesn't get it sometimes, she said, twirling her fork around some microscopic portion of pasta. He needs to learn that actions have consequences. The other 3 giggled because nothing's funnier than a grown woman talking about her husband like he's a misbehaving pet. These women collected other people's misery like some folks collect stamps. What did he do this time? Jessica asked, leaning forward with that hungry look she gets when she smells drama. Oh, Sarah waved her hand dismissively. Questioning my decisions, asking too many questions about money, the usual controlling behavior. Controlling behavior, that's rich coming from someone who once made me return a coffee mug because she didn't approve of the font. But I sat there smiling and nodding, playing the part of the dutiful husband who just doesn't measure up. I'd gotten really good at that performance over the past 8 months. Maybe he needs a reality check, Amy suggested, and I could see the wheels turning in Sarah's head. Nothing gets her more excited than an opportunity to prove a point, especially when it involves making someone else miserable. By the time we left the restaurant, their plan was set. Drive me out to the middle of nowhere and leave me there to think about my behavior, just long enough to teach me a lesson about respect and gratitude. The 45-minute ride was them laughing and congratulating themselves while I sat in the back like luggage, watching the miles tick by on the GPS. They'd picked this spot because it was far enough from civilization to be inconvenient, but not so far that I'd actually die of exposure. How thoughtful. You need a lesson, David, Sarah said when she stopped the car, gripping the steering wheel like she was trying to strangle it. Walk it off. Here's the beautiful part. I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't even look upset. I just got out, closed the door with a polite click, and stood there watching them drive away. Sarah was probably expecting tears, angry phone calls, definitely some groveling when I finally made it home. Instead, she got me standing under that highway sign, grinning as their taillights disappeared. Because what Sarah and her accomplices didn't know was that I'd been expecting this. Planning for it, actually. For months. I've been documenting every cruel comment, every casual threat, every little joke about putting me in my place. And tonight, they'd finally given me exactly what I needed. See, my awakening to Sarah's true nature didn't come with dramatic music or slow-motion revelations. It came on a Tuesday morning while helping Sarah with what she claimed was a computer glitch. I'm sitting at her laptop trying to figure out why her spreadsheet keeps crashing. Sarah's in the shower singing off-key when I stumble across something that makes my blood turn to ice. 2 sets of ledgers, same charity gala, same dates, completely different numbers. The first one, the one she'd shown me when I'd asked about unusually large administrative costs, had everything looking neat and tidy. The second one, buried 3 folders deep in a directory labeled Backup, told a very different story. Numbers that didn't add up, receipts that didn't exist, and enough red flags to outfit a communist parade. I sat there listening to Sarah's off-key warbling, and something clicked. Not anger, that would come later. Just this cold, crystalline clarity that whispered, well, 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 what do we have here? I'd been noticing things for months. Little inconsistencies that individually meant nothing, but together painted a picture I'd been too trusting to see. Sudden consulting fees on our joint account statements. business trips that involved more resort time than actual business. Sarah's new habit of taking phone calls in the garage or stepping outside whenever certain names came up. But like a good little husband, I'd made excuses. She works hard. She deserves some luxury. Business networking requires relationship building. I'd been so busy being understanding that I'd completely missed the fact that my wife was running a con game with our money as the stakes. That Tuesday morning, sitting in front of two sets of books that told completely different stories, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to document everything. My first call was to Rebecca Martinez, a forensic accountant who specializes in what the legal world politely calls financial irregularities and what the rest of us call stealing. Rebecca has this way of talking about embezzlement like she's discussing the weather, calm, professional, and absolutely ruthless when it comes to following money trails. "Mr. Thompson," she said when I explained my situation, "I need you to understand something right up front. If we find what I think we're going to find, this isn't going to be a simple divorce proceeding. This is going to be a criminal matter." "Good," I told her, and I meant it. The second call was to a security company that specialized in residential protection services. That's where I met Marcus Chen. 6 feet of calm competence wrapped in the kind of professionalism that comes from years of keeping people alive in dangerous places. When I told Sarah I was upgrading our home security system, she was delighted. "Finally, taking some initiative," she said, patting my cheek like I was a golden retriever who'd finally learned to sit. If she only knew that the security upgrade included comprehensive surveillance of her home office, complete digital forensics capabilities, and monitoring software that could track every keystroke on every device in the house. Marcus installed cameras so sophisticated they looked like decorative elements, microphones that could pick up conversations 3 rooms away, and recording equipment positioned to catch safe combinations and keypad entries. The third call was to Patricia Wong, a divorce attorney who'd earned her reputation by being exactly as ruthless as her clients needed her to be. Patricia doesn't do amicable separations. She does scorched earth litigation for people who've discovered their spouse isn't who they thought they married. "Don't confront," she told me during our first meeting. "Don't accuse. Don't change your behavior patterns. Just document everything and let me know when you've got enough evidence to bury her." And so began the most exhausting 8 months of my life. Not physically exhausting, emotionally exhausting. Do you know how hard it is to smile and nod when your wife brags to her friends about how she's training you to be more compliant? To sit through dinner parties where she casually mentions how she's teaching you respect while her friends giggle like it's the funniest thing they've ever heard? I learned to be an actor in my own life. When Sarah would make cutting comments about my contribution to the household, I'd smile and change the subject instead of defending myself. When she'd talk about her latest business opportunity requiring significant cash investment, I'd ask interested questions while mentally noting every detail for Rebecca's files. When she'd come home from her mentoring sessions with Kevin Lawson smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine, I'd kiss her cheek and ask how her meeting went. The hardest part wasn't the emotional misuse. I'd gotten used to that. The hardest part was watching the numbers. Rebecca had taught me to recognize the patterns, and once you know what to look for, financial fraud is as obvious as a neon sign. $5,000 here for consulting fees that never produced deliverables. $10,000 there for business retreats that looked suspiciously like romantic getaways. $15,000 for equipment purchases that somehow never materialized. But the real breakthrough came when Sarah started getting sloppy. Success had made her confident, and confidence had made her careless. She stopped bothering to hide phone calls with Kevin. She stopped coming up with creative explanations for overnight trips. She started talking about me like I wasn't in the room, discussing my behavioral issues with her friends like I was some kind of project. That's when I started recording the conversations. Not just financial discussions, everything. Every casual cruelty, every dismissive comment, every moment when she revealed exactly what she thought of me and our marriage. The audio files piled up like evidence in a criminal case, which, as it turned out, was exactly what they were going to become. The final piece fell into place when Rebecca traced a $15,000 business retreat to a luxury beach resort where Sarah and Kevin had checked in under his corporate account. Same dates, same room, registered as Mr. and Mrs. Lawson. Even the room service charges painted a picture of romantic dinners and champagne breakfasts that definitely weren't about business development. I didn't rage when Rebecca showed me the hotel records. I didn't punch walls or throw things like men in movies do when they discover their wives are cheating. I just added the paperwork to the file, thanked Rebecca for her thorough work, and went home to smile and nod through another dinner conversation about Sarah's mentoring relationship with Kevin. Because by then, I wasn't David the sufferer anymore. I was David the prosecutor, building a case that would stand up in court and destroy the carefully constructed lies that had become my life. So there I was that night, standing in the rain as it finally started to fall, when the sound of an engine made me turn around. A black pickup truck rolled out from behind the abandoned gas station. Marcus stepped out like he'd been waiting there all night, which, knowing Marcus, he probably had been. "Evening, Mr. Thompson," he said in that calm, professional voice. "Right on schedule." "Hey, Marcus," I said, and I couldn't keep the satisfaction out of my voice. "Perfect timing as usual." He handed me a dry jacket and a thermos of coffee because, of course, he'd thought of everything. As we drove away from that highway sign, I pulled out my phone and checked the recording app. Crystal clear audio of the entire evening, from dinner conversation to roadside abandonment. Every word, every laugh, every casual cruelty documented and time-stamped. Sarah thought she was teaching me a lesson about knowing my place. What she'd actually done was hand me the final piece of evidence I needed to show the world exactly who she really was. My phone started ringing around 12:17 a.m. Sarah Home, because of course she'd saved herself as Home instead of using her name. Everything with Sarah had to be a statement about ownership and control. I let it ring. Then I let the next 3 calls ring too. The voicemails started around 12:45, and they were exactly what I'd expected. First came amusement. "David, don't be such a drama queen. Call me back when you're done pouting." Classic Sarah. Turn your sufferer's reasonable response to misuse into evidence of their emotional instability. Then came annoyance. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. I'm not playing this game with you." Notice how it was never her fault, never her problem. I was the one being unreasonable for not appreciating her creative approach to marriage counseling. By 1:30 a.m., she'd moved to actual anger. "You're embarrassing yourself, David, and you're embarrassing me. Whatever point you think you're making, you've made it. Now come home and we'll talk about this like adults." Like adults. That was rich, coming from someone who'd literally abandoned her husband on the side of a highway. But here's where it got interesting. The cavalry started arriving around 2 a.m. First, Jessica tried emotional manipulation. "David, honey, Sarah's really worried about you. We all are. This isn't like you. Please, just call and let us know you're safe." We all are. Right. Because nothing says genuine concern like coordinating your guilt trip strategy. Amy went with threats. "Look, David, I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but this is getting out of hand. Sarah's talking about calling the police and reporting you missing. Is that really what you want?" But Lisa, sweet, simple Lisa, delivered the masterpiece. She'd been drinking all night and completely forgot that subtlety was supposed to be part of their strategy. Her voicemail was pure incrimination. "David, oh my God, we're so sorry. We didn't think you'd actually stay out there. It was just supposed to be funny, like a prank. Sarah said you needed to learn your place, but we didn't mean for it to go this far." I played that message 3 times, just savoring the pure, unfiltered admission of guilt. Then I saved it to the cloud. Around 3 a.m., they must have had a strategy meeting because the messages suddenly got coordinated. All 3 started sending variations of the same theme. This was all a misunderstanding. They were just trying to help our marriage. They never meant for me to actually walk home in the rain. Classic misuser playbook. Minimize, deny, shift blame. But the crown jewel came at 3:47 a.m. in the form of a video message from Lisa's phone. The 4 of them, clearly drunk, toasting with champagne glasses in what looked like Sarah's living room. "To teaching David a lesson," Sarah said, raising her glass with a smile that would have made a shark proud. "Some people need to learn things the hard way." I watched that video 5 times, taking careful notes of the timestamp, location, participants, and exact wording. Then I forwarded it to my secure email, uploaded it to 3 different cloud storage services, and sent a copy to Marcus with instructions to add it to the legal file. By 4 a.m., my phone had stopped ringing, and I was sitting in that hotel room with a stack of evidence that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. Recordings of the abandonment, voicemails admitting guilt, video evidence of them celebrating my suffering, and a complete digital trail of their coordination efforts. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse at 8:30 a.m. with 3 hours of sleep and a thermos of hotel coffee. Patricia Wong was waiting on the courthouse steps, looking like she'd been born in a power suit and raised on legal briefs. "Emergency filing went through 20 minutes ago," she said, handing me coffee that was definitely better than what I'd been drinking. "Judge Harper drew the case. She's got a reputation for not tolerating games, which works in our favor." "What are we hitting them with?" I asked. "Emergency injunction for spousal abandonment, coercive control, and financial misappropriation. Oh, and I added intentional infliction of emotional distress, just for fun." Her smile was the kind that should come with a warning label. "Your wife's going to need a very good lawyer, and even then she's screwed." By 9 a.m., Sarah had been served with papers that turned her world upside down. By 10 a.m., she was probably screaming at some expensive lawyer trying to explain that you can't unabandon your spouse on a highway. I spent the morning at Patricia's office, going through our evidence one more time. Audio recordings, video clips, financial documents, hotel receipts, witness statements. We had enough ammunition to fight a small war, but the real weapon was something simpler: the truth. When you're dealing with pathological liars, the truth is like kryptonite. Courtroom 3B was everything you'd expect from a small-town courthouse. Wood paneling that had seen better decades, fluorescent lights that made everyone look green, and uncomfortable seating that reminded you justice wasn't supposed to be comfortable. Judge Harper looked exactly like someone who'd spent 30 years listening to people's excuses and had run out of patience. Sarah arrived 15 minutes late, which was already a bad look. She'd pulled together her courtroom outfit, conservative dress, minimal makeup, the whole respectable businesswoman wrongly accused aesthetic. But she couldn't hide the fury in her eyes or the way her hands shook when she thought no one was looking. "Your Honor," Patricia began, "my client was abandoned by his wife and her associates, 87 miles from home during a severe weather event. This wasn't a marital dispute. This was criminal endangerment disguised as domestic discipline." She hit play on the audio recording, and suddenly the courtroom was filled with Sarah's voice saying the words that were about to destroy her life. "You need a lesson, David. Walk it off." Then came the sound of car doors slamming, an engine starting, and me standing alone in the rain while 4 women drove away laughing. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the parking lot. Judge Harper's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, something cold and final. Sarah's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, this was clearly a misunderstanding between spouses." "Counselor," Judge Harper interrupted, her tone freezing, "I suggest you listen to the rest of the evidence before you finish that sentence." Patricia pulled out the financial documents that Rebecca had organized into a timeline so clear even a first-year law student could follow the money trail. Offshore accounts, corporate credit cards used for personal expenses, consulting fees that went to companies existing only on paper. "Your Honor, we have documented evidence of systematic financial misuse spanning 18 months, Patricia continued, spreading papers across the table like a poker player revealing a royal flush. "The defendant has been embezzling from both marital assets and her employer's charitable fund." Sarah's face went from angry to pale to something approaching panic as her lawyers whispered frantically in her ear. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Patricia said, barely containing her glee, "we have video evidence of the defendant and her co-conspirators celebrating the commission of this crime." The courtroom's big screen lit up with Lisa's drunken video masterpiece. 4 women raising champagne glasses, Sarah's voice crystal clear. "To teaching David a lesson. Some people need to learn things the hard way." Judge Harper watched the entire video without blinking. When it finished, she turned to Sarah's lawyer with a look that could melt steel. "Counselor, does your client have anything to say about this celebration of what she now claims was a misunderstanding?" The questions that followed were simple and sharp, designed to give Sarah enough rope to hang herself. Did she abandon her husband on a highway? Yes, but it was just supposed to teach him a lesson. Did she take money from joint accounts without his knowledge? Yes, but she had every right to manage their finances. Did she celebrate leaving him stranded in the rain? Well, yes, but they were just blowing off steam. Each answer was another nail in her coffin. When Judge Harper finally spoke, her words fell like hammer blows. "I am immediately freezing all marital assets pending a full forensic investigation. I am granting the petitioner exclusive use of the marital home. I am issuing a no-contact order preventing the respondent from maltreating, threatening, or approaching the petitioner. And I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution." The gavel came down like thunder. And just like that, Sarah's carefully constructed world collapsed into rubble. Within a week, federal investigators were involved because the money trail crossed state lines. The FBI had a task force specifically for cross-border embezzlement, and they were very interested in our evidence package. The grand jury convened on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, had returned indictments that read like a greatest hits album of white-collar crime. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and using electronic communications to facilitate felonies. That last one covered everything from the group chat coordination to Lisa's drunken victory video. Sarah and Kevin got hit with the full menu of charges. Jessica, Amy, and Lisa got charged with criminal conspiracy after the FBI discovered they'd spent the night of the courthouse hearing frantically deleting text messages, not knowing everything had already been backed up to servers requiring federal warrants to access. Kevin folded faster than a lawn chair in a hurricane, taking a plea deal for 5 years in federal prison, plus complete financial restitution in exchange for full cooperation. His testimony included turning over passwords to encrypted accounts and a detailed timeline of their criminal partnership. Sarah fought like someone who genuinely believed she could lawyer her way out of recorded confessions and bank records. Her legal team burned through 3 different defense strategies before settling on the classic blame the sufferer approach, claiming I was a controlling husband who'd driven her to desperate measures. The problem with that defense? We had 18 months of audio recordings that proved exactly the opposite. Every conversation where Sarah threatened me, every casual cruelty, every moment where she treated me like a misbehaving pet was admissible evidence. The criminal trial started in September. Federal court is different, more formal, more serious, staffed with people who've seen every scam in the book. The jury was working-class folks who understood exactly what it meant to have someone steal your money, and they were not sympathetic to privileged women who needed to embezzle hundreds of thousands to feel empowered. The moment that sealed Sarah's fate was when the prosecutor played the audio recording from that night on the highway. Not just the abandonment, but the entire evening. The jury got to hear Sarah discussing her plans to teach me a lesson while actively stealing our money and cheating with her business partner. The verdict came back after 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge called their crimes an elaborate scheme motivated by greed and executed with callous disregard for the sufferer's well-being. Sarah got 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, complete financial restitution, and a lifetime ban from working in financial services. Kevin got his agreed 5 years. The 3 accomplices got probation, community service, and fines that would keep them financially uncomfortable for years. But the real consequence was the complete destruction of their social and professional lives. The story went national, picked up by true crime podcasts and social media accounts. Sarah's charity became a punchline. Kevin's consulting business collapsed, and their friends abandoned them faster than rats leaving a sinking ship. 18 months after sentencing, I got a letter from Sarah in prison. The handwriting was still perfect, still the same careful script she'd used to forge my signatures. The content was pure Sarah, a masterclass in projection and blame shifting. She hoped I'd had time to reflect on my role in what happened to our marriage, complained about how unfair her sentence was, and how everything was really my fault for being such a difficult husband. The closing line was what made it worth framing. I hope you learned your lesson. I read that sentence 5 times, each repetition more hilarious than the last. As if the moral of this story was that I should have been more grateful for being psychologically tortured and financially misused. I walked into the Highway Hope Initiative office the next morning with the letter and a frame I'd picked up at the dollar store, right there on the wall next to our mission statement. To provide practical support, legal guidance, and emotional validation for individuals escaping financial coercion, psychological misuse, and social humiliation, I hung Sarah's final masterpiece of narcissistic delusion. Because that's what I did with the settlement money and my freedom. Started an organization that helps people recognize and escape financial and emotional misuse. We've helped over 400 people in 2 years, prevented an estimated $3 million in financial fraud, and established partnerships with law enforcement agencies that now refer cases to us regularly. Rebecca became our volunteer forensic accountant, running clinics to teach people how to recognize financial misuse and document it properly. Marcus developed a training program for personal safety protocols, paper trail management that any adult could learn. de-escalation techniques that worked in suburban kitchens as well as war zones. The lesson Sarah thought she was teaching had nothing to do with the lesson I actually learned. She thought leaving me 87 miles from home would break me down, make me more compliant, prove that she held all the power in our relationship. What she actually taught me was that cruelty, when documented properly, becomes evidence. That misusers always overplay their hand eventually. That having a plan and the patience to execute it beats having temporary power and the arrogance to misuse it. My real lesson wasn't obedience, it was clarity. For years I'd made excuses for her behavior, convinced myself that her cruelty came from stress or insecurity or some fundamental flaw in my character that justified her treatment. That night on the highway, standing in the rain while she drove away laughing, I finally understood that some people are just broken in ways that can't be fixed, forgiven, or explained away. Sarah had been wrong about almost everything, but she'd gotten one thing right. I had learned my lesson, just not the one she thought she was teaching. The man she tried to abandon in that storm had learned to become the shelter for others, and that, it turned out, was the only lesson that mattered.